Well, good morning and welcome to November. Another new month. It's a strange year for time, this one, right? Some parts of it seem to have gone by really slowly, mostly those serious lockdown moments. But then also at the same time, it seems like it is flying by, and I can't quite believe that it is November. I've never been a person who likes to think about Christmas too early. Like, I tend to reserve Christmas songs for December, and the Christmas tree only normally goes up like a week or 10 days before the big day itself. But this year, I can't help but sort of wonder what Christmas is going to look like. Will families be able to meet together? How many people are going to be on their own, unable to join with their loved ones? It could be a really tough time for some people this Christmas time. Sometimes it's all too easy in our lives to focus on what is coming up, especially if it's something that we're unsure of or something that might be a little bit unpleasant or unexpected. So Josiah was the last really good king of the nation of Judah. He was the last king to sort of reign for all of his life before Jerusalem would go on to be conquered and the people of Judah would be taken away and settled in a foreign land. This was the grandson. Josiah was the grandson of Manasseh, who, if you were watching last week, who we talked about on Friday, and his father Ammon was probably even worse than Manasseh was. He worshipped all of those same idols, but he never had that moment of repentance. So Josiah had these examples of his father and his grandfather, people who had completely turned away from God. And yet it was as he decided to invest time and effort in repairing the temple of God that Josiah stumbled upon a book of the law. And he realized just how far away the people of Judah were from living the lives that they were supposed to be living. Josiah humbled himself and he asked God what was going to happen. He pleaded with him to spare this nation of Judah from the destruction that was foretold in the pages of the law that he had just discovered. And God made the promise that Judah would not be overthrown while Josiah was king. But he did say that it would still happen. Something unpleasant was coming. And yet instead of moping or mourning or spending all of his time worrying about the future, about things that he couldn't control, Josiah instead decided to offer everything that he had in worship to God. He threw an enormous Passover celebration. We can read about it in 2 Chronicles chapter 35, verse 18. That tells us never since the time of the prophet Samuel had there been such a Passover. None of the kings of Israel had ever kept a Passover as Josiah did. That's amazing. Just think about that for a moment right here. None, not a single one of the kings of Israel or Judah had ever kept a Passover as Josiah did. That includes David, the man who we know as being the worshipper with the heart that sought after God. That includes Solomon, the man who built the temple. It includes all of the kings in a time when the nations of Israel and Judah were prospering massively. None of them offered more to God. None of them kept a Passover the way that it was supposed to be kept as Josiah did. That just blows me away. Because this is here, right at the very end of the nation of Judah. This is when the people knew that its destruction was coming. And yet, despite all of that, Josiah holds absolutely nothing back to bring worship to God. He might not have been as wealthy as some of those former kings. He might not have had as much material stuff to bring, but he offered his whole heart. And the Bible sums Josiah's life up by saying that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and followed the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. Despite knowing that something bad was coming, he kept his focus on God and he never ever turned away. How easy would it have been to say, this is just too hard. We know this is going to get too bad. What is the point in doing all of this? And yet still, he brought everything that he had to offer to celebrate this Passover in a way that it had not been done for generations. Now, I think if somebody asked me, when was biblical Israel's heyday? When was its very best time? Well, I think I'd immediately jump to, probably like David's reign, I guess, or maybe like the first part of Solomon's when they were at peace and they were prospering and worship to God was really high on the priority list. And yet it was Josiah who observed the Passover as it should have been. Right when things were in decline, that's when he brought everything that he had to worship his God. So it doesn't matter how much we have to bring to God. What matters is what is going on in our hearts. What matters is holding nothing back. It's not compartmentalizing our lives and allowing God into bits of it, but keeping some things to ourselves. God demands nothing less than all of us. That's not harsh. It's not constricting. It's in letting go of everything that we find absolute freedom, that we can be who we were made to be. Whatever happened yesterday, it doesn't matter. Whatever worries you might hold in your heart for tomorrow, put them down. Because what matters really right now is this moment in time. Josiah knew what had come before. He knew what his father and his grandfather had done, what many of his other predecessors had done. He knew they had messed up really badly. He knew that they hadn't done the right thing, that they had sinned against God. He knew what was coming in the future. He knew there was going to be a time of hardship and pain for his people. And yet, in that moment, on that day, he offered everything in worship to God. He offered his whole heart. Can we do the same? Can we take a moment right now, even if it's just a second or two, even if it's just a minute, to say, God, my whole heart is yours today, and I'm going to try my best to follow after you. I don't know what Christmas is going to look like. I don't know what next year is going to look like. But in this moment, right now, I am yours entirely. These lives that we live they're made up of individual days. They're made up of individual moments. Don't try to think about how you're going to keep the faith if things get harder tomorrow. Offer this moment right now to God, and then the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one. Each individual moment is a choice. Are we going to hold nothing back and give it all to God? Or are we going to try and keep hold of things ourselves because of our worries over what happened yesterday or our fears about what's going to happen tomorrow? I want to encourage you so much today. Just hold nothing back. Give this moment right now in its entirety to God. Thank you so much for joining me today for these thoughts from the Bible. I'll be back on Friday for some more, and it would be lovely to see you there. So thank you, and I'll see you then.